Chapter 11 Night Magic. As night closed in on the forest, Magi Lune began to feel really worried. From the very moment that the Hexxus Tree fell, she knew that Hexxus had escaped. She didn't know how, but she could feel his evil presence again. At first it was only a passing feeling, but with the approach of evening, the feeling persisted and grew more intense. She knew there were humans at the edge of the forest. She'd known that from the moment she'd seen the dark smoke rising from the base of Mount Warning. In the past, she never had reason to fear them, but these were different humans to the ones she'd known long ago. And although she couldn't say why, she knew the clouds of smoke meant trouble. An even stronger feeling that these humans had been responsible for the release of Hexxus added to her concern. For the first time in her long life, she didn't know exactly what the trouble was, or just what was going on in the forest. But she knew that something was about to happen. When the sun had set, Magi decided to see if she could find some answers down by the rock pools. Tonight there would be a full moon, and she knew that the water in the pools would be crystal clear and easy to read. As she hurried away from her home, Ak and Rock followed close behind her. The giant cassowaries were also worried. They'd never seen her so upset. But they weren't the only ones who were worried as night fell. Around Old High Rise, there was a great deal of activity, as word got around that Crysta had disappeared. Glowworm lanterns lit the forest, and fairies and elves gathered around the towering strangler fig tree waiting for news.
"We must organize a search party," said Gyps, taking control of the situation. "Everyone can join in, especially the night-timers. Everyone who can see well in the dark should start looking now. The rest will have to wait until morning."
"I'll go and see if there's any sign of her down at the falls," said Slider, gliding away.
"Does anyone have the faintest idea where she could be?"
asked Ash.
"She winged out of here at sunrise with the fruit grabber,"
squawked Blackbeak.
"That's the last I've seen of her."
"How about you, Pips?"
asked Ash.
"You know her better than anyone."
"Well, she's got her wings in a twist about a lot of things at the moment," he replied thoughtfully. "You see, she thinks Hexxus is back, somewhere at the edge of the forest, and she was talking about flying to Mount Warning, but I'm sure she didn't mean it."
"Mount Warning?"
exclaimed Elwood.
"You can't be serious!"
"Why didn't you tell us this earlier?"
asked Gyps.
"You should have stopped her,"
said Elwood, nervously tugging his beard. "You try to stop Crysta doing what she wants to do," Pips muttered.
"There's no use arguing,"
interrupted Grandfather Ash, stepping between Elwood and Pips.
"What's done is done. What's important is what we're going to do to find her."
"What's happening? What's happening?"
shouted Granny Belladonna, scrambling down the tree.
"We are organizing a search party for Crysta,"
Gyps told her, steadying her as she landed awkwardly beside him.
"Then I'm coming too.
Said Granny.
I like parties."
"You can't go, Granny.
Said Rose Myrtle.
It's far too dangerous, and you can't fly very well."
"Pot gobbles to you."
Sniffed the old fairy.
"You're not going to leave me out of any party."
While everyone was discussing what to do, Pips told Sandy he was going to look for Magi Lune. Deciding on a plan of action, he asked Sandy to round up the Beetle Boys. Wokia said he'd stay and listen to what the elders had planned. The three young elves agreed to meet at Python Rock when the moon was overhead. Pip set off without knowing exactly where Magi Lune lived. He rarely went to the Antarctic beech tree forest. A whole mountainside of gloomy old trees wasn't exactly his idea of fun. He never understood Crysta's fascination with this corner of the forest or with Magi Lune, and he thought any interest in the old powers was a complete waste of time. Now, by the light of the full moon, the moss-covered trees seemed ghostly. Curtains of trailing mist brushed against him, and the hooting of a lonely owl made him feel uneasy. He was relieved when the trees thinned and he saw a clearing below him. Two huge silhouettes stood beside a circular rock pool. When he flew down to investigate, he saw that they were Ak and Rock. Magi Lune was standing between them. As he neared them, he noticed that the surrounding trees were packed with silent spectators. Owls, possums, and sugar gliders were all quietly sitting together. Wondering what he'd flown into, Pips edged onto a crowded branch overhanging the rock pool. Did she lose something? He asked a rare white lemurroid.
She's looking into the future.
The lemurroid whispered, swinging by her long furry tail. Ak and Rock were also whispering, but their deep voices carried on the still night air.
There is an unnatural force gathering,
said Rock, as Magi Lune scooped sparkling droplets of water from the pool.
It's reflected in the waters.
What's an unnatural force?
Asked Ak.
Never you mind,
replied Rock importantly.
You'll know it when you see it.
Ask her if she could look a bit harder and tell me where Crysta is, called Pips. But the big birds told him to be quiet and not disturb Magi.
There are other things to look for right now,
whispered Rock. Like what? Staring into gobs of water? Said Pips impatiently.
It's not where she's looking that's important. It's what she sees,
said Ak. Pips watched Magi Lune move as if in a trance around the pool. She scooped up more silver droplets of water, and these she spun magically in the air. Looks like hocus pocus to me, said Pips, flying away. I've got more important things to do than watch a full moon display of fairy magic. I've got to find Crysta. As he flew towards Python Rock, his unease grew. He thought the air felt different, and the moon shadows looked eerie. At the time, Pips didn't know it, but in those night shadows lurked Hexxus. Hexxus hadn't been free for very long, but he was growing at a frightening rate. When the tree that had held him prisoner for so long had fallen, he suddenly found himself to be a free spirit. At first, he was only a wispy, shadowy figure, but he unexpectedly found a surprisingly good source of fuel to feed off. One that wasn't available when he'd been on the loose before. It was thick, black oil, and it spilled from the machine the humans were using to cut down the trees. Hexxus hated humans as much as forests and fairies and fresh air and everything else that represented life. But now he discovered there was one thing he liked about humans. Their machines. The oil gave Hexxus substance, and the fumes he inhaled pumped him up until he was bigger than he'd ever been before. He liked being the size and shape of a dense black cloud because it gave him greater scope for destruction. So, tonight, while the FernGully mob looked for Crysta, Hexxus tested his newfound strength. With his fiery eyes burning, he glided through the forest as a dark, swirling mist and killed everything he touched. He discovered that he could kill whole sections of the forest with one blast of his toxic breath. Right now, he was really enjoying himself because he knew it was only a matter of time before he destroyed the whole forest and every living thing in it.